Hello and welcome to episode 525 of the Unauthorized History of the Pacific War podcast. My name is Seth Paridon, historian and deputy director of the Mississippi Armed Forces Museum. And with me, as always, is my good buddy, co-host, and author and historian, John Parshall. How are you this fine September the 16th?
Doing all right. I was looking back last week on our midway footage episode, and I was feeling like I was a little flat. So my goal this week is to be a little more scintillating. I'm just gonna up the scent, which is why I'm wearing, again, the high energy red. I'm gonna get my Japanese Special Naval Landing Forces freak on. So yeah, I'm good. Oh, the other thing I want to do is also give a shout out.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, to my old salt friends who very kindly replaced my broken cup. So here I am, death to decaf. Granted, I'm drinking high test tea out of this and not coffee. Hope we're still friends, but nevertheless, thank you so much. Good
Yeah, but
dudes.
your wife drinks
So,
the coffee though.
oh yeah. No,
There you
she
go.
loves that stuff. Got the
That
haze
counts.
gray thing. I'm looking at her right now. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anyway, she's over there. She's listening.
There you
Yeah.
go. There you go. Well,
as,
uh,
as little as possible, as she
well, I was
says.
going to say I apologize in advance because here we go.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, this is a topic, and we're going to break. So if you've seen the opening credits of this, it's already abundantly clear that we're breaking this into two parts. But we're breaking this topic into two parts because there's a lot to talk about, and it's something that people have wondered why we didn't do it to begin with.
Mm.
So we're going to do it here now, and it's legendary story. So let's get into it. So it's a fly speck in the middle of the world's largest ocean, a desolate, God-forsaken hellhole without fresh water that no one wanted until they did. Discovered in 1568 by the Spanish, the three little islands were promptly dismissed by their discoverer as useless.
Useless.
For over 200 years, they were deemed useless by anyone who ran across them. The three small islands, grouped together in a semicircle with a lagoon in the middle of them, were considered nothing important, even when they were visited by the U.S. Navy in 1841. The U.S. naval officer, one Lieutenant Charles Wilkes, for whom one of the islands was named, dismissed the atoll as, quote, unfit for human habitation, unquote. Yet, in the infinite wisdom that is the United States military, that is exactly what they would become by the mid 1930s, a stopover on the route from Honolulu to Guam and points beyond. All 2,600 acres, some 2,000 miles west of Honolulu, 1,200 miles northeast of Midway, and 1,400 miles to the east from Guam, were home to a hotel and a few buildings, but mostly inhabited by hundreds of different seabirds and hundreds of thousands of rats. Aside
Where
from
did they
that,
come from?
uh, that's a whole nother story.
The Spaniards. I don't know, or who,
No,
somebody.
quite
Anyway,
possible.
yeah,
It's
it could
quite
be.
possible.
Yeah, sorry.
Aside from that, the stopover was mostly a forgettable spot of brilliant white sand in the middle of the blue Pacific, and that was all until 1941. In the dark days after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, the entirety of the national attention span was focused on this small atoll. The fight being put up by the small band of United States Marines on both air and the land, aided immeasurably by civilian contractors, kept the rapt attention of the American populace. Dubbed the Alamo of the Pacific, Wake Island and the gallant defense thereon made its way into Marine Corps and American military legend, and rightfully so. This is a really
Yeah,
it's a story that, we always say this, but it's a God's honest truth. You think you know about it until you
right.
really know about it. I mean, this was not a walkover by any means, as the
Yeah,
Japanese are going to learn.
they're going to learn. Yeah.
Yeah.
And intriguingly, too, just the fact that you and I were debating for a good 10 minutes before we actually were doing this thing on some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about in the next episode. The history on this is not at all clear in certain aspects, and which makes it, intriguing as well. So,
There's a
anyway.
lot, yeah, and we'll get into it. And I don't know we're going to get into part of that discussion in this episode specifically. There's a lot of mythology that's been
Hmm.
passed on even during the war up until, well, still now. And
Yeah.
we'll get into that here as we get through it. So in 1935, Pan American Airways, Pan Am, well, for those of us who remembered Pan Am,
Pan Am.
began a construction on a
That
stopover
dates us.
facility.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, I remember Pan Am. I think that
Pan
was my
Am.
first flight as a kid. Anyway,
Really?
yeah, this facility for they wanted to build a stopover facility for the Clipper aircraft that were
Hmm.
flying from the United States to Honolulu to Guam and the Philippines and points they're on. And Wake
Yep.
was going to be one of those places. They sent 113 construction workers to Wake. And we're going to, by the way, we're going to consider Wake the entirety, all three islands. It's just going to be
Yeah.
easier to do that. And where specific islands are need to be mentioned, we will do that. Just so bear with us here.
Wake.
Um, they wanted to build a hotel, a restaurant, and facilities to maintain and repair the aircraft as they're coming in these clippers. And if you ever seen pictures of these clippers, these things are
They're
huge.
super cool. Yeah.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
They're neat. They're
Yeah. Really
massive
neat.
flying boats. Yeah.
Yeah.
But to build this, and I gave the mileage distance, it literally is in the middle of friggin' nowhere.
Yeah.
So to build anything out there, you got to hump this stuff from
Thousands
Hawaii
of miles
mostly.
away on a ship. Yep. You
Yeah.
got to haul it out of your hold and put it in lighters and bring it onto the beach. And yeah, there's nothing here. And you have to build it all from scratch. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Everything. And the islands themselves are not, you know, ready for any sort of construction. There's coral outcroppings on the beaches, like
Yep.
big coral boulders and things like that around the beaches. So it's very difficult to get things ashore. And then in order to get in the lagoon, there were these coral heads in the lagoon, a la kind of like Tarawa, frankly, at certain aspects.
Yep.
There's coral heads where you can't get a friggin' boat in there to get the stuff
Right.
ashore to build. So before you even bring anything ashore, you got to bring things to the island to blow things up to
Right.
bring things ashore. And that's
Yes.
exactly what happens. And this is not a project that's going to be like wham bam.
Overnight. No, they're
No.
working on this place for years to try to
Yeah.
turn it into a decent facility. They've got to dynamite all those coral heads out of the lagoon and yada, yada, yada. So, yeah, it
Mhm.
takes a while. By about 1937, there are enough Americans and Chamorros living on Wake Island to field two baseball teams. So now we know, yes, stuff's getting real here, right?
Yeah.
Uh, the Caucasians ran the Pan Am facility, and the Chamorros acted as labor. 2 evenings a week by 1937, one of these Pan Am clippers is coming in and landing in the lagoon. But aside from that, there's not a lot of visitors coming in here. But that's
Mhm.
going to change as war clouds start darkening. So,
There you go.
yeah,
There you go.
a little
Got to throw that one
gratuitous.
in there.
Heck yeah. Again, that's for my editor because it would drive him crazy. Yeah.
So, stepping back a few weeks when we talked about FDR's preparation for war, actually several
Yeah.
weeks now, um, this development of weight kind of falls into that realm. In 1938, as the war clouds are darkening and the ships are being constructed and the blueprints are being drawn and blah, 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 blah. One of the aspects of that whole buildup is the United States Navy wanted to establish more bases,
Yep.
specifically in the Pacific, for not necessarily stopovers, but for outer defensive bases and
Yep.
potentially offensive springboards as well.
Yep.
And this kind of falls into that. The Hepburn note. It was this, Claude Swanson was SecNav at the time, and he assigned Admiral Arthur Hepburn the job of find me some places where we can build some bases, make me a
Right.
list, and we'll go from there. Well, he comes up with about 18 locations, of which Wake is actually number three on that
Hmm.
list behind Pearl as number one and Midway as number two. Wake
Number
is the
two.
third. So
Yep.
it's
Well, and that makes sense
significant.
because if you consider that the Japanese defensive positions in the Marshalls, which is the island group that is just to the
Mhm.
west of Wake, that's where we're thinking this big decisive sea battle is likely to happen on our way, in War Plan Orange to go and relieve the Philippines. So obviously, we would like to have Wake to be, if nothing else, a good base for our PBY Catalinas to be doing scouting operations in advance of the fleet into the Marshalls in preparation for that sort of a battle. And by this point, too, in 1937, the Japanese would have withdrawn from the naval treaty system. And
Mhm.
so, kind of all bets are off in terms of the previous provisos of those naval treaties had said you can't fortify any of these islands that are out in the Pacific. But at this point, this it's all kind of moot. So we could even build this place up under the guise of, yeah, we're just beefing up the Pan Am Clipper station here, but gee,
Yeah.
that's a flying boat and PBYs are a flying boat. And so if we've got the facilities to keep a Clipper operating, we've also now got the facilities to keep a bunch of PBYs up and humming too.
And
So
that is precisely what they do, or what they
yeah,
try and do.
yep,
Money is allocated in 1939, excuse me, by the federal government to do this for
yep,
the Navy. $7.5 million is
which is real money
allocated.
back in the day. Yeah,
That's a lot of money back
that's a
then.
chunk of change. Yep.
It is. And they're giving this money to the US Navy to build Wake into, as I put, something useful for the
Yep.
US Navy. And as I put in the notes, hurry the hell up with it too, because
Yeah.
war clouds are darkening. So for months and months and months, typical of the federal government, um, it just kind of hung out in limbo. The money just it was allocated, but it wasn't given to them, and it was just kind of floating in the nether out there
Mm.
until none other than Carl Vinson came in and slung it under the table in 1940. So almost, I think it's like 11
Yeah.
months and some change after
Right. So we've
he got it.
lost a year at this point,
Yes, yes.
which has interesting implications for the battle that ends up happening there. Because you look at that lost time and you just think to yourself,
Yeah,
damn, if
yeah.
we'd had more in the way of fixed defensive positions and particularly more in the way of manpower, granted, that was going to be hard to get too. Um, but yeah, we this for all of the initial advances, I'm sort of fast forwarding here.
Mhm.
The Japanese were very successful in their first phase offensives, but I personally feel like with a little more effort, a little more manpower on our part, and frankly a little more luck, we could have held on to Wake Island. Spoiler alert. So
Yeah,
anyway,
absolutely. And when we
yeah,
cover that next week, we can get into that and the
yeah,
reasons why. And one of the reasons why is we're gonna talk about it here in just a few minutes. But so the Navy, to be 100% clear, and this is very, very important because this plays a large role in what happens in December 1941. The U.S. Navy is not going to build this base. The
mm-hmm.
U.S. Navy is not going to send engineers out there. They're not, it's not going to happen. They're not going to do that. That's not what the Navy is for. They are going to hire civilian contractors and it's not just one company, although it does kind of fall under the purview of one company. It's a consortium. It's a
Yeah,
bunch of different companies that are coming together to build all of these naval bases,
yep,
like all across the Pacific and a few in the Atlantic and the Caribbean and things like that in the
yep.
Panama Canal
Up
Zone.
in Alaska too. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So it's it's important to note that because these civilians are going to play a tremendous role in the
yeah,
event that comes through. In 1939, speaking of the Navy or the Naval Department, the United States Marines had planned for a 510-man garrison on Wake. That's what they planned for. Um, and this is important here too because of this stuff has to be shipped over there because most of this
yep.
construction starts taking place in 1940, even though the money's allocated, as we
38.
said. So
Yeah,
it's 510 dudes with three batteries of 3-inch guns of 4 guns each,
yep.
three 5-inch shore batteries of 2 guns each, 24 50 caliber machine guns, 24 30 caliber machine guns, and your various small arms and different things like that.
Yeah, so as I
And
break that down, you've got probably half of those guys are allocated to the coastal batteries, and you've probably got about a company or two of infantry sort of backing that up. That's who's going to be manning those lighter automatic weapons and that kind of stuff. So
you would think,
yes,
but as we'll see,
yeah,
not
exactly.
necessarily the way.
Yeah,
So in late 1940, and by late I mean December, laborers, construction workers, engineers, civilians, all from this consortium, they ship out, and I do mean ship out from Honolulu to Wake to begin the construction of the Naval Air Station, or as I put
hmm
NAS,
hmm
an airfield. They're going to build an airfield, a seaplane base, a submarine base, and buildings that support
yeah.
those type of facilities.
It's
So they
pretty
send out
ambitious.
it
Yeah,
is, and they send out a ton of crap out there.
yeah. 2,000 tons of supplies because yeah, if you're going to build a base, you got to get legit. Would put on the Navy transport the William Ward Burroughs. This includes trucks, tractors, bulldozers, dynamite, lumber, etc., as well as the barges that are going to be towed behind it, which are going to be able to move that material to the shore, and 1,146 civilian construction workers. And so construction finally kicks off on January 8th, 1941.
which is, again, the loss of time here.
Yep.
And there was only, and we're going to see, I'm going to read a quote here, or one of us will read a quote here in a minute about from husband Kimmel, who
Mm,
realized that Wake was actually going to be potentially something very important in a war. So keep in mind, the money was allocated in 38, and it wasn't until Vincent
beginning of 41 that we actually had.
shoves it through. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a lot of time that's lost here.
Yes, it is.
So, the civilian contractor who is in charge of this whole shebang is a guy named Nathan Dan Teeters. He went by Dan Teeters. That was he preferred his middle name, I guess. He
Yeah.
was a native of Ohio. He was an Army veteran. He'd been in the Army for, I want to say, like 8 or 9 years. He'd been around for a while. He was a stubborn dude, feisty, and as a naval officer that served with him, all Wake said, was someone who would be good to have along in a fight. And he will be. He will be.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, he's a very experienced engineer. He works for the Morrison Knudsen Company, which is a
Mhm.
construction company from Texas, which helped build the Boulder Dam and was also the leading company amongst this consortium. So they're the primary contractors, and everybody else are subcontractors
Right.
through Morrison Knudsen. And so Teeters answers only to the Navy officer who's actually in charge of the base there. And at the time, this is Lieutenant Commander Elmer Sweeney, who generally tried to stay out of Teeters' hair during the construction process. So, for all that the Navy is in charge, the bottom line is that Teeters'
Yeah.
word is basically law.
Mhm.
And his men really liked him.
Yeah, yeah, he
So,
was a good dude. He's a great big old boy too. From all, and you see pictures of him post-war, and he's. I guess I spoiled the story there. He does survive, but
yeah,
he's a pretty good sized fella. So he's one of those guys that could run a construction company with an iron fist if he
yeah.
had to, but he didn't have to. And as far going back to what you were saying about Lieutenant Commander Sweeney, yeah, he's the military representative, the Navy representative on the island there, but he's not in charge of anything because there's nothing to be in charge of because Teeters is
Right.
building the
Yeah.
things that he's going to be in charge of. So as construction proceeded, and that's one thing is even though they started in January 41, they do get a lot of stuff built pretty quick. I mean, with
Mm,
1,100 dudes on 2,600 acres of ground, there's a lot of stuff that's flying around in
yeah.
terms of construction, and they do get things moving pretty quick. So at the time, SINCPAC was Admiral Husband Kimmel, who we talked about extensively in the last several weeks. He saw the importance of Wake as both an offensive stopover, like you were saying, on any kind of counteroffensive that's going to go towards the Marshall Islands,
Yep.
and as a defensive strong point in a future war with Japan. On April 18th, 1941, Kimmel wrote to Betty Stark, and he said, quote,
Betty.
if Wake be defended, then for the Japanese to reduce it, it would require extended operations of their naval forces in an area where we might be able to get at them.
Yep.
We should try by every possible means to get the Japanese to expose their naval units. In order to do this, we must provide objectives that require exposure, unquote, which is a very interesting quote here.
Yeah. Yeah. No, he is. We've talked in some of the Japanese naval planning about this whole notion of bait forces, right?
Yes.
That we're going to trail our coats out here, and here's something juicy, come and get it. And Wake is essentially the same animal in Kimmel's mind, that he
Mhm.
was very offensively oriented, and so it's only 2,000 miles from here to Honolulu. That's a relatively short jaunt for the naval forces we have based at Pearl. So if Wake can become the focus of a major fleet engagement where we can start the process of wearing down the Imperial Navy at the beginning of a war, that'd be great. And so to that end, we want to make Wake as much of a little hedgehog as we can to induce the Japanese to try to reduce it so that we can fight a fleet action there.
Yeah, a tough nut. They want to make it as tough of a nut to crack as they
Yep.
possibly can to
Yep.
hold the Japanese in one place, for as long.
Yep.
And to that end, Kimmel urged Betty Stark to send as many Marines as he could within reason to the island no later than June the 1st, 1941.
Hmm.
Stark had orders cut, or actually Kimmel technically had orders cut to send the 1st Marine Defense Battalion to Wake Island, quote, as soon as practicable. It wouldn't be, it would be 2 more months, however,
Yeah.
before those guys arrive. And even then, it wasn't the entire defense battalion. It was only 173 enlisted men and 5 officers, and they reach Wake on August the 19th.
Yep.
So
And
things are
yeah,
not
that's
moving quickly.
again, that's roughly a company. And this is one of those places where if you look at this campaign through the soda straw, it inevitably makes people go, well, why didn't they send more people out there? It's just like because everybody needed everything and they needed it right now. And there were
Right.
many other bases that also needed Marines. At this point in time, there's not so much as a fully constituted Marine division in the entire
Correct.
theater.
Correct.
So we're having to do things in penny packets, and we just ain't got a full battalion to send out to Wake at this point in time. Damn it.
Yeah.
Would that we had, but yeah, this is what we got: 173 guys.
Yeah. On October the 15th, 1941, Wake Island's Marine Force receives their commanding officer. He's a Marine major, obviously, named James Patrick Sinnott Devereux.
Mm-hmm.
He arrives on site. He's an 18-year Marine veteran. He was assigned to take command of the 1st Defense Battalion, train them into fighting shape. And again, some of these, you got to remember, few of these guys have maybe seen some combat in the Banana Wars or things like that, or maybe
Right.
even World War One. But the vast majority of these dudes in the 1st Marine Defense Battalion are 17, 18,
18,
19
19.
years old. They're
Yep.
young, young, young men. And Devereaux, that's like his specialty. He's an artillery guy. He's known to be an artillery guy, and he is a taskmaster. He's going to whip you into shape. He might not
Yeah.
make a lot of friends doing it,
There may be tears, but
but yeah, there will be tears. But when he's done,
yeah.
he's going to have a force, and this was a known thing. That's why he was sent out there.
Yeah.
Um, that when he's done, he's going to have a force that's going to be, I don't want to say competitive, but it's going to be worth
Competent.
their time. Yeah,
Yeah.
competent. Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
he wasn't a
He's
micromanager. He's just going to
right.
get the job
He's a
done.
trainer.
Yeah.
He's a taskmaster, no nonsense. He's
Mhm.
respected, but he's not exactly the kind of guy you want to have a beer with at the bar.
Mm-mm.
Um, so not terribly charismatic, but yeah, he knew what he was doing when it came to a training standpoint, and he was certainly again he was a respected individual.
Yeah,
So
very, very much so. And he trained the hell out of these people.
12 hours a
When
day.
12 hours a day, nearly every day. And I say nearly every day because when they weren't training, they were building defensive positions because
Right.
Devereux was not stupid. He knew that if the Japanese do come this way, more than likely we're going to be the first speed bump in the road if they
Right.
come this way, which not a lot of people, we talked that,
Sure.
it might be an outpost, but, or might be a stopping post for the Japanese, but he had them training 12 hours a day. And if they weren't training, as I said, they're digging holes and they're
Yeah.
digging revetments and are building revetments and they're digging defensive positions and things like that. Um,
The problem being that there isn't a lot of construction material
there's
that's
nothing.
dedicated exactly, which means that you cannot, get overhead cover in a lot of cases to these positions. Where basically this is a glorified exercise in filling sandbags and building a little outpost like that.
Yeah,
So again, that lost time figures prominently because if we'd actually had the ability to put reinforced concrete positions on this island, it would have made the Japanese undertaking a lot worse than it actually was. But again,
absolutely.
you
Yeah.
know, this is the state of American defense before this war. We're scrambling everywhere and we just don't have enough stuff. So
Yeah.
it goes.
You can only do what
What
you
you can
can
do.
with what you have. Yeah, and that's
Yep.
it.
Yep.
So as the Marines are digging these holes and and building emplacements for their AA guns and different things like that, that's all being done under Dan Teeters's tutelage because most of these guys are, as I said, kids.
Yeah.
And he's, kind of looking, saying, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And this is the important part. So defense battalions, Marine defense battalions in 1941 called for 939 enlisted men and 43 officers. That's according to the United States Marine Corps in 1941. That's what they were supposed to have. They
1,000
were
guys.
defensive battalions to
Yep.
defend bases, but they were never expected to hold out for like a long period of time.
Hmm.
That's what your infantry regiments are for. And the thing with Wake is that it was never, ever slated to receive a Marine infantry battalion at any time at
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
prior to the war. Never.
Yeah. Yeah. These formations are, again, primarily designed to ward off an amphibious landing. I mean, they've got a fair amount in the way of surface to surface gunfire, but yeah, they're not real heavy on pure infantry formations. Meaning that if the Japanese get ashore and you actually have to go toe to toe in a small unit action, you don't have enough of those small units to go around.
Yeah.
That said, fast forwarding to Guadalcanal, I mean, we brought along a base defense force, along with that, precisely to defend the landing beaches against the Japanese counter landing. That's what that group on Guadalcanal is for. That's kind of what they're here to do on Wake as well, repel an amphibious landing. But yeah, they don't have enough guys in the ranks bearing small arms and automatic weapons necessarily to fight off a serious infantry action. So
Wow. No.
there you go.
So Devereux, if he'd had enough dudes, he envisioned stationing an entire battalion on each island to properly defend them. However, he didn't have enough guys.
Yeah.
On November the 1st and November the 2nd, excuse me, 1941, Wake got the last Marine riflemen it would ever get when they were dropped off by the USS Castor. Instead
Yeah.
of nearly, as I put in the notes, 1,000 men under his command, Devereux had exactly 373 enlisted men and 15 officers, which
Yeah.
is
Not,
significantly less than
yeah.
what
Yeah. A third of his established TO.
yeah,
So it
yeah.
goes. So yeah, he hasn't got enough guys to man all the anti-aircraft guns. He hasn't got enough guys to man even all the 50 calibers. Only 6 of the 12 AAA guns could be manned, and the machine guns, which he had a lot of, again, he can only man about half of those. So the only positions on this island that are manned at full strength are that group of 5-inch shore batteries. How many? There's 6 guns total, right? Is that correct?
Oh man, I got to go back to the notes.
Oh God,
Let's
here we
see.
are just shooting ourselves in the foot. Here we said it.
Three
Yes,
5-inch shorter batteries of
of
two each.
two
So yes,
of 2 guns
6.
apiece, so 6 guns.
Yeah,
Yep. Yeah.
yeah,
All right.
yeah. Um, we talked about equipment, and the Marines, God knows, they got firearms. They
Yeah.
never lack for firearms. But one of the things that they do not have, for to any real degree, is fire control equipment
Right.
for a lot of these things. They do have some rangefinders. They have what's called a coincidence rangefinder, I think, on 2 of the batteries, 5-inch shore
Hmm.
batteries, but they don't have anything for the AAA. Nothing.
Right. Which means you're
So
firing over open sites, and that's a much, yeah, less effective way of getting things done against aircraft. So
as we're going to see.
yeah.
So the worst part, and this is something that's going to play, foreshadowing, that's going to play a huge role in how Wake actually does come out, is communications.
Yep.
Uh, the communications initially in the beginning of the campaign or the fight are actually fairly well, they're good. But as things divulge, as the situation becomes worse, they rapidly get worse, because the only way these guys had to communicate to one another across these 3 islands was telephones.
Right.
And these ain't cell phones. These are like you're laying the wire to get
Hmm.
from A to B and
Yep.
C to D. And because of the late arrival of a lot of their equipment and the Marines themselves, they did not have time to properly bury these wires.
Yeah.
And they are quite literally laying along the side of the dang road, so any Japanese with a knife can walk up and go and cut them,
Yoink. Yep.
and you're done. That's it.
Yeah.
You're out.
And they're
And
vulnerable, of course, to artillery fire as
right,
well. Any
right.
sort of a preparatory bombardment. So yeah, the fact that we don't have enough radios on this island means that it's even though this is a fairly small place, 2,200 acres grand total, that is actually a fair amount of real estate. It's not like Devereux sitting in his command post can physically see every point on this island.
Can't.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, if your comms are not good, that's going to make it very difficult to coordinate your defense against the Japanese.
And to know what the heck is going on, as we
Yep.
shall see.
Yep.
So up to the 28th of November, Devereaux was the top banana. He was the man on Wake Island. However, on that date, he is, I don't want to say relieved because that's not the proper term, but he is usurped. And if you will, he gets outranked by a gentleman who
Yep.
comes in. And this is a naval officer who is sent to Wake to be the commanding officer of the NAS once it opens up, which is rapidly approaching. This guy is an enigma because you
Yeah.
read some accounts of Wake and he's a hero, and other accounts of Wake he's a dog, and it is what it
Yeah.
is.
Commander Winfield Scott Cunningham. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, he's the guy who's going to be in charge of the Naval Air Station. But, right out of the gate, you can see that this is a naval officer. He's not an infantry officer. And so he's far more interested in how do I keep my birds up and running
Yes.
on the airfield than he is necessarily around the defense of this island per se. And he seems fairly checked out when he arrives. So he comes onto the island, and it's pretty clear from the outset that he does not want to be there. Doesn't like his
No.
assignment. He's out in the boonies. Um, uh, Part of the personal kit that he brings along with him are his golf clubs, his dress blues, and various other accessories. This is not the kind of place where you're going to be doing a lot of golfing, my dude. And so he, gets into a car, tours the defenses, goes to Devereaux afterwards, tells him that the positions are not good, and that's pretty much all the advice he gives them. He then uh, basically calls it a day. So
Yeah.
the initial the initial tea leaves are not great in terms of the working chemistry between these two individuals.
Not at all. And as we're going to see, especially when the next week when we talk about the land campaign, if you will,
Yeah,
Devereaux is very respectful of the pecking order.
yeah,
He's your typical Marine Corps officer. He's very respectful of rank, but he also is aware of the fact that Cunningham is completely out of touch with the way
right.
things are going to go, and he's going to make calls on his own, which are good, and then some things that result in other ways. So, speaking of the NAS, the Naval Air Station, the same day that Cunningham arrives on Wake, Marine Fighting Squadron 211, VMF 211, left of a mooring mast on Oahu and flew aboard CV-6, aboard the Big E. They'd been told, this is kind of crappy. They told these pilots that they were just going out for training missions. In other words, they're just going out on the Enterprise probably to conduct, carrier landings and da 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 da
Right,
da da da. All you need is you know, your skivvies,
right.
couple of
A,
uniforms, toothbrush, and
a
shaving kit.
toothbrush, you should be good.
You'll be good to go. You'll be back in a few days. Eh. When they
Eh.
get, when they get aboard Enterprise, the only guy that knew that they were not that was malarkey was their CO, Major Paul Putnam. Um, when the 12 F4 F3s land on USS Enterprise, they are then told of their mission. Oh, by the way, you guys are going to Wake Island,
Yeah.
and this is where you're going to stay.
I don't
Um,
understand the reason for the secrecy here. This just baffles me. I
I
mean,
don't get it.
yeah,
I don't get it. It doesn't
we're
make
not
any
even going to
sense to
let
me at
these
all.
guys pack a duffel bag. I mean, what the hey?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't get it
Anyway,
either. It doesn't make any sense to me because there's no war on right now. And I
yeah,
mean, it's not like we hid the efforts to build Wake. So whatever, it is what
right.
it is. So on the 4th of December, 1941, 200 miles away from Wake Island, we know the story. What happens to Enterprise? She launches her fighters. This is VMF 211, and it's about a 2 hour flight and once they form up and they go, about a 2 hour flight to Wake Island. For the fighters, they're escorted by one PBY, so
Mm-hmm.
they
Navigational.
find their way
Yep.
to Wake. Um, Putnam puts down on Wake Island. He's obviously the first fighter to land on Wake Island. He's surrounded, and after his guys, the chicks come to roost after him. Uh, they're surrounded by all these civilians and the Marines, and they're cheering, and this is a big
Mm.
deal, because now
Yep.
ostracized, now they have some sort of offensive punch power. God
Right.
forbid if something was to start.
Yep. So Putnam is fairly experienced, although not terribly experienced in the F4F necessarily. But he's flown pretty much everything from Ford Tri-Motors up to the F4F, and has won commendations along the way for his leadership. He's a good guy, pretty caring individual, despite the fact that he couldn't tell them to pack a duffel bag.
Yeah.
He's well liked by his men. His executive officer is a guy named Henry T. Elrod from Thomasville, Georgia.
Yeah,
36
big.
years old. Elrod is much older than most of the men under his command. And between Elrod Putnam and Elrod's best friend, Captain Frank Theron, the three of those guys are the three most experienced aviators amongst this dozen. Most of these pilots are officers, but there are actually two enlisted pilots amongst the ranks as well.
Mhm.
Just like the ground troops here, who are very young men, VMF 211 likewise is a very green unit. They've never dropped a bomb before, they've never fired their weapons in their F4F. And on average, they only have 30 hours in type in that aircraft, which is not a lot, and that
Mhm.
that includes Putnam and Elrod. So these guys are just brand new behind the stick. I
Yeah.
mean, again, fast forwarding to sort of the shaking of the head that we give to the Japanese kamikaze pilots, and only got 50 hours, grand total stick time, and no time practically in type. That's the same situation that we have
Yeah.
here with VMF 211.
Yeah. I mean, these guys are, as you said, they're as green as grass. And I don't remember the exact date that the F4, F3 came out, but I mean, it hadn't been out, and by
All
out,
that
I mean
long.
assigned to units. It hadn't been out that damn long. So,
Yeah.
the fact that they even had them
Yeah.
is a good thing. But I mean, you can
Yeah, I mean, at
also,
least you're not flying buffaloes, which
yes,
you
which
could well have been.
you dang right you could have been.
Yeah.
And I guess that I don't want to speculate, but that almost kind of says, the importance of this, that the Marines are getting, that 211's getting their F4Fs, and they're brand spanking new when they go out there.
Yeah.
Um, another thing that I found to be rather sad, frankly, is that the mechs, the mechanics, the ground crew had never even worked on these airplanes before.
Hmm.
So they
Yeah.
didn't know what the hell. There were no manuals, and this is it's like every book about Wake Island. These guys didn't know. I mean, they're mechanics, so they know how to work on an aircraft.
Right. They
But
know
it's
what a radial aircraft engine is, but yeah, I
right.
haven't seen this
But
one
they're all
before.
different. They're
Yeah,
all different, and it's going to play a
exactly.
big deal. And when these guys get here, the
Yeah.
fighters are there, and the mechs are there, and the ground crew's there, and they got ammunition. They don't have any friggin' spare parts.
Yeah. No spare parts,
Nothing.
not a lot of maintenance facilities. And the other thing that's missing here is revetments for the aircraft.
Yes.
So for those who are not in the know about what a revetment is, it's a beveled series. You can make it out of sandbags if you want to. Concrete or earth is better, but you want to have some sort of a defensive position around that aircraft to protect it from fragmentation and that sort of thing from
Right.
three sides. And you want to have those revetments relatively spread out, if at all possible, to reduce, if a bomb hits one plane, we don't want it to, cascade and damage the planes that are around it. We ain't got any of that at this point. We've got a bare landing strip and some concrete places to put these aircraft. That's what we're looking at.
And that was Putnam's biggest beef when
Yeah,
he landed. He's looking for the revetments, and they were building them,
sure.
but they were
But
not ready.
right, we're
And
building a
and
lot of things at this point. Yeah.
exactly. And he's looking around. And he's like, "Where the hell am I going to park these damn things?" Because he knows why they're out there.
Yep.
And he's like, "We get hit. This is going to be a bad situation real quick."
Yep.
So the day he lands, he immediately goes to Cunningham and reports to Cunningham, because that's the CO. He goes to report to Cunningham and says, "Look, this is my idea. This is what I think we ought to do. We need to put up, first of all, I need to train these people. They need more hours in these aircraft, number one. Number two, what do we have in terms of search?" To which Cunningham says, "Nothing. They got
Right.
nothing. There is no radar, even though Wake was assigned, I think, at least one, if not two,
Hmm.
the mobile radar stations, but they're quite literally sitting on the pier in Pearl Harbor or somewhere in Oahu waiting to be shipped out. And of course, as we know, they never get there. So the only way, two ways that these guys can learn that the Japanese theoretically may come is if Putnam's people see them in the air
Yeah. Yep.
and lookouts spot them from the air. Um, and by that I mean Devereux stations guys in these watchtower things that is the highest point on the island with
Yep.
binoculars and says, if you see any airplanes, let us
Let
know.
us know. Yeah.
Let us know. So
Which is not much in the way of an early warning system. Yeah.
no, no,
So,
no.
oh well.
So Putnam was going to start his patrolling actions the following day, or I'm sorry, a few days later after he does a few training and like orientation flights.
Right.
That date would be Monday, December the 8th, 1941. Um, you got to remember, Wake sits on the other side of the international date line.
Yep.
So while it's Sunday, December 7th in Pearl Harbor, it's Monday, December 8th in Wake.
Hmm.
That day, the Sunday, so it has to be December 6th, the United States time. Devereaux gives his guys the day off. It's the first day off they'd had in like a month or two.
Yeah.
They have a barbecue. There's some warm beer that finds its way out there, and the guys just kind of chill and relax.
Yeah.
And they have a time to basically, take a breath. Devereux wrote of this day, of that day, he wrote, and I quote, "If we had time to get ready, well and good. If we didn't, we'd have to make do with what we had. Meanwhile, there is no use fretting." And he wrote those words on December the 7th. All right, so shortly after 0800, wonder why, Wake received word of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. And everybody thinks, there's all United States Navy, United States Marine Corps and civilians on Wake Island. No, there were Army people there as well. The man who actually receives word of the attack on Pearl Harbor is none other than Army Staff Sergeant Ernest Rogers. He was manning one of the Army's portable radio stations that were on the island. And as soon as he receives the message it's sent out from Hickam in the clear, he
Hmm.
immediately scribbles it down, gets in a motorcycle, and flies over to his boss, who is Army Captain Henry Wilson. Wilson immediately reads the message that is handwritten down on this piece of paper, bursts out of the door, runs over to Devereux's quarters, which are like, I don't know, 50 yards away, probably.
Right. How many army guys are there on here?
Not many. There's only about a half a dozen guys. There's only
Okay.
about a half a dozen, and they're manning the radio stations. That's the only reason that they're
That's the
there.
only thing they're doing.
Is it?
Okay.
That is it. That is it.
All right.
So when he runs into Devereux's quarters, Devereux's shaving. He's in there. He's got lather all over half of it, actually half of his face. He'd shaved half of his face when he
Cute.
comes running in with the news.
Right.
Devereux reads the message, runs outside, and this is one of the few comical moments of the entire operation right here. As he's running out the door, he grabs his bugler, who was a gentleman named Alvin Wankler.
Perfect.
And
It's a
field
mwah.
music, yeah, field music, I think third class, Alvin Wankler. And he was known like throughout the Corps as the worst bugler in the United States Marines. Like this guy couldn't blow anything on that bugle. So
Right.
Devereaux runs out there, grabs Wonker and says, blow call to arms, these people need to move.
Right.
And either because he was nervous or he's caught off guard, he
Right.
literally blew every tune known to man except Call to Arms.
Arms.
And he's like given, as they called it, an erratic concert because all these Marines are standing there going, what in the hell is he
What are
doing?
you doing? Yeah.
Finally, at the end, he remembered how to play. I guess it just flashed in his mind how to play general quarters, all that jazz. Once he starts doing that, the Marines are they're still standing there like,
Is this legit?
yeah,
Yeah.
what the
Yeah.
hell? I mean, this guy's just blowing,
Rando notes here. Right.
yeah, and all of a sudden he's playing GQ. What the hell are we supposed to do? Devereaux climbs up on top of like a sandbag
Garage.
bunker or something
Yeah.
and just starts screaming and hollering because he sees that nobody's moving. Everybody's just standing there. And he
Right.
starts screaming and hollering, goes, this is no drill. This is no drill. Pass the damn word, or his exact words.
Yeah.
And at that moment, people start running around and getting things going.
Alvin Wonkler, the paraphrase, "You're killing me, Smalls."
Yeah,
Right? Come on, man. The
yeah,
one time I needed GQ out of you and I can't get it.
yeah. And it's
Uh,
it's a known thing. It's like he
right.
was known to be, and he admitted he's like, yeah, it
He's,
was terrible.
I
He
was
was the
terrible.
worst bugler in the Corps. So there was a guy named, and you're going to hear about him in the next episode more, a guy named Wiley Sloman. Good name, too, by the way.
Mhm.
He was a Marine, young man. I think he was 19 at the time. He was in one of the mess tents eating chow when he hears the erratic concert, and he's
Yes.
sitting there. He's like, "What in the hell is going on?" And his sergeant comes flying into the mess tent and is like, "Move! This is real. Let's move." So he
Yeah.
wraps a sausage in a pancake, grabs 3 bandoliers of ammunition, and just runs.
Pigs in
Just
a
go.
blanket, man after my own heart. It's like,
That's
okay,
it.
I'm gonna move, but I'm taking some chow with me because I don't know when the next time is I'm gonna be eaten, and
Yeah,
certainly
yeah.
don't want to let these sausages go to waste here. So anyway,
I'd have been stuffing them in my pockets.
yeah.
So Cunningham, as soon as all this goes down, Cunningham, who had been out of touch, he does get word relatively quickly, and it's not by radio or anything like that. He hears it by word of mouth just as not long after Devereux starts literally jumping up and down, screaming, to say, "Hey, damn it, this is what's going on." Dan Teeters, who had not met Devereux, or not Devereux,
Putnam.
Cunningham,
Yeah.
until that day,
Okay.
bursts into Cunningham's office and says, "Hey, I'm Dan Teeters. What can I do to help?" And that is going to be a significant thing because what Cunningham did not know, or at least at the very least he was relatively unaware of it, is that Devereux and Teeters had worked out some sort of gentleman's agreement, if you will, to bolster the Marine defenses with civilians.
Hmm.
And the only civilians that were going to be allowed to do anything at this time, this changes, at this time are ex-military, of
Hmm.
which there were about 150-ish.
Right.
And these guys are going to, as I put in the notes, train with the Marines on the sly. And because as we know, civilians legally
Can't.
can't.
Yeah.
And these guys are going to be carrying ammunition. They're going to act as stretcher bearers, different things like that. Should the
Yeah.
need arise, God forbid.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, because bottom line is if you're a civilian and you act in a military capacity, all bets are off in terms of your treatment if you get captured and that kind of thing.
yes.
You want to be in uniform in order for the not that the Japanese obey international law, but in a perfect world, if they did, yeah, you don't want to be a civilian in that capacity. You would prefer to be a soldier. But nevertheless,
Yeah.
it's clear that Teeters has an understanding of, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
And, every able bodied man we need to be utilizing to the maximum effect. And so if that means lugging around ammunition to the emplacements or acting as stretcher bearers or what have you, then we're going to do that.
And that's, it's very admirable, frankly, because none of those
Yeah.
guys had to do that. But as you said, they all know that they're in the same boat unless they can actually, no pun intended, get on a boat
A boat
and get
and
the
get
heck
out of
out
here.
of there.
Yeah.
But I found this interesting. I put this in here. So Teeters at that point makes it known to say, like, I got 150 dudes here who are willing to do whatever they need to do
Yeah.
to help everybody out here. At that point, Cunningham and his executive officer, Elmer Gray,
Hmm.
decided to not tell anybody else on Wake that Pearl Harbor had just been attacked. He tells Teeters, don't tell anybody else. Let those guys get to work. Let them do, whatever it is they had on their docket that day.
I just don't
And
understand the reasoning for that.
I don't either. I don't
Yeah.
either because as we're going to see here rapidly, a lot of those guys probably would not have been hurt had they
Yes.
been told to
Right.
find some
Take
cover or
shelter. And
something.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. There's a
yeah,
war on.
exactly. So, as we were saying just a minute ago, John, the only early warning system they're going to have are Putnam's F4Fs, which he puts four in the air almost immediately.
Four of his
And
12, and that makes sense. You can only keep about a third of your planes up at any given time anyway. So yeah, that's what you're going to do.
and the guys up in the watchtowers, and they're like we said, they're 18-year-old Marines with binocs, and that's it.
Yeah.
let's talk about Putnam and dispersing the fighters because this is a huge thing. He had debated initially internally on what to do with the fighters to disperse, whether to disperse them, even though they didn't have any revetments or partially completed, or keep them to where they can get after them quickly. And it doesn't really work out for the best. Construction workers had begun, they'd been working on revetments, but none of them were finished. And you're going to say, oh, well, the Japanese had revetments. Yeah, well, they put the civilians to work on the revetments after they captured the island, as you're going to know. But none of his fighters, none of Putnam's fighters are under any kind of cover at all. So, and he has them, I don't want to say clustered, they're not wingtip to wingtip, but he figured maybe we ought to disperse them a little bit better. But where the hell are we going to put them? Because there was no place to put them. He figured that the only thing that could be done to disperse those fighters was to keep four in the air all the time.
Hmm.
And that would leave, 4
Only
hour
8 on the
patrol.
ground.
Right, exactly. So it's the best he can do at the time. And he felt that rightly, as you talked about earlier, that the Marshall Islands, if the Japanese are going to come, which we know now they have come to Pearl Harbor, that if they're going to come, they're probably going to come from the Marshall Islands because that is the closest Japanese
Yep.
bastion to Wake Island. And in that event, he's going to tell his fighters that are in the air at that time to patrol in that general vicinity,
Direction. Yep.
to keep your eyes peeled. And if you see anything coming at them, get on it.
Right.
So sure enough, not long after this, there are four fighters in the air, one of which is Henry T. Elrod. There's three other aircraft with him. They're on patrol. They spot two formations of V's some 10,000 feet below them.
Mm.
Um, and even though he's got the height advantage, as we're going to see, everything happens so fast, and he spotted them. It's not his fault, but he spotted them too damn late. These aircraft are Nels, and we
Yep.
talked about this with Justin Pike.
Yep.
These are the This is widely used aircraft.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the G3M is the predecessor to the G4M Betty. But yeah, Anel is still, a reasonably modern aircraft at this point in time, and they were used by a lot of the land-based naval attack squadrons. In fact, there are going to be some Nels that are going to be in on the sinking of the Prince of Wales and Repulse. So this is not an antiquated airframe by any stretch. And so yeah, here they come.
Yeah, 27 of them to be exact. Nine of them peel off in a separate formation. That's why Elrod said he saw two formations of V's. They've already done
Mm-hmm.
this. Nine of them are going to go bomb Wilkes Island, while the remainder are going to focus on the airstrip for obvious reasons. I put on the ground, the civilians and the Marines thought the incoming aircraft were B-17s.
Oops.
Because, yeah, and it's again one of these funny moments. These guys are manning their anti-aircraft positions, but they're just kind of standing there staring at these aircraft coming in. And a gentleman named Frank Gross, who was a Marine, just asks aloud. He's in one of these 3-inch AAA batteries. He says, "What are those B-17s?" And one of his buddies says, "B-17s, my ass. Those are Japanese, you moron." And within seconds,
Right.
the bombs start falling quite literally within seconds, and
Yeah.
it kind of hits everybody at the same time that, oh, we're in danger, and
Yeah.
people just start, like
Yeah.
rats when you overturn it, like a sinking ship. They're everywhere.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that means that yeah, there are a lot of people that are basically right out in the open when these things coming down. Just kind of stunned, that this kind of thing does happen. I mean, there's a similar air raid that's going to happen in Rangoon in Burma fairly early on, where there were thousands of civilians that's kind of out. Wow, look at all those planes; those are really pretty. And then, you get
Yeah.
this realization, oh my God, the bombs are coming down. It's like, yeah, it's a little late now in the day to be figuring that out. Um, so the nine Nels that go after Wilkes Island, which is the tiniest of these three islands, do very little damage to Camp One and Camp Two out there. They then strafe and after they bomb, they receive some ground fire from the Marines for their trouble, but that's about all that they do. But the main target, of course, is the airfield, and that's going to get the attention of 18 of these Nels, two nine-plane Chutai, and they just plaster it. The
Yeah.
Pan Am facilities on the island are reduced to rubble. There's actually one of these Pan Am Clippers is in the lagoon, and that is stitched up pretty good by machine gun fire. and unfortunately, 10 of the Chamorro laborers are killed by that gunfire. Japanese bombs hit both fuel storage tanks as well as 655-gallon fuel drums that were stacked along the side of the airstrip. Oops.
Yeah.
Um, so the fuel destruction obviously is going to be an issue for the air group that is there. The real problem is these eight remaining Wildcats that are just sitting right parked on the tarmac. By the time that this group of Nels disappears, seven of those eight Wildcats are destroyed. And the remaining one is only good to be used from a parts perspective at this point. So, yeah, you've just lost two-thirds of your air power because you didn't have a
Yeah.
replacement.
Because you had no place to put them. Exactly.
Yep.
So the four fighters that were aloft did go down to pursue the Japanese Nels, but they don't make it there in time. By the time they get down to the area where they could possibly intercept them, the Nels are gone. This happens in seconds. I mean, there's
Yeah.
they bomb and their history.
Yeah.
As the bombers come over the airfield, aside from destroying seven of the eight, and technically eight of the eight on the ground, really. Four of VMF 211's fighter pilots that are on the ground run to their aircraft to go get in the air and do
Right.
their thing. Lieutenants Frank Holden and Henry Webb are killed as they're running towards their aircraft. One, it said later that they were strafed. Frankly, it doesn't matter. They're both
Right.
deceased. They never make it to their aircraft. Two other guys do, however. Lieutenants George Grave and Lieutenant Conderman are either killed in their airplane or getting on their airplane. Um,
Mm-hmm.
one of the aircraft, I think it's Conderman, if I remember correctly, a bomb goes off literally right next to the bird, and it just shreds the bird and him as he's
Dread
getting
him.
in the airplane. Um,
Yeah.
those four pilots are killed outright. They are not wounded. They are dead. Ground crewmen who had nowhere to go hid
Yep.
under the aircraft or along the strip because they were quite literally caught out in the open.
Yep.
They're either killed by machine gun fire or bombs or both. In all, 55 ground personnel on or around the airstrip. Of the 55 that were on there, only 21 escaped harm. 23 were killed outright, while a further 11 were wounded in some fashion, and most of those guys perish later.
Yeah.
60% casualty rate an hour into the war.
This is kind of your little mini version of the Clark Field debacle in the Philippines at the beginning of the war there. Eh, Perhaps not as scandalous a set of circumstances, but yeah, we've lost two-thirds of our airplanes and two-thirds of our ground staff are dead at the end of this initial attack. It's a real shellacking.
It really
Um,
is.
yeah, they end up killing as well dozens of these civilian workers as they were eating in a mess hall at Camp 2. Strafing Japanese aircraft and bombs killed them as they're eating breakfast. So why didn't we let people know that there was, in fact, a war going on? We might have saved some of their lives. Uh, in about 7 minutes, Japanese bombs and bullets totally wrecked Pan Am's facilities. Bombing and strafing set fire to the hotel in which five Chamorro employees died, and also to a stockroom, fuel tanks, and many other buildings, and demolished the radio transmitter. Nine of Pan Am's 66-man staff lay dead. Two of the Philippine Clippers crew were wounded as well. Yeah, it's a pretty bad attack.
It's a beating, and it is the worst beating that they take via air, but it just
Yeah,
pounds the air power, which is
yep,
Wake's only offensive punch that they have.
yep,
Um, Almost as soon as the nails depart, the guys start to pick up the pieces. The Pan Am Clipper, as you said a minute ago, was hit by machine gun fire, and a couple of the crewmen are dead, but the rest of the guys are like, "We're out.
we're out.
Goodbye."
Yeah,
They
the thing is
start.
flyable, and so they load the passengers on that thing, and they boogie. 32 passengers and workers pile into that thing, and away they go back to Hawaii.
And they go to Honolulu, and that's where they make the first. No, I'm sorry. They go to Honolulu, and then they go to Frisco, and then when they get to San Francisco, that's where they make the first report of Wake's attack is actually in San Francisco by
Mm-hmm.
these people when they get off the Pan Am Clipper. Um, Several of the AAA batteries were damaged to some degree. A
Mm-hmm.
Marine by the name of Bright Godbold was in charge of Battery D. he had his crew repair the weapon, and then they had to move it, or they moved it manually. And
Yep.
that doesn't sound like it's that big of a deal, but that's a 3-inch anti-aircraft gun,
That's a heavy piece of
manhandled.
ordnance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
solid steel, brother. There's no aluminum there.
Yeah.
And they wind up moving this thing. It takes them all night long to
Yep.
move this weapon. The
Yep.
civilians do get in there and they do lend them a hand, and they do help them move
And
this thing.
the reasoning here is that we think that the Japanese will have spotted where those emplacements are, and next time they'll be coming around to put
Yep.
the remainder of those weapons out of commission. And so, if we can move our batteries around after every attack, it makes it that much more difficult for the Japanese to target those things and destroy them. It's a good thought. It's just, man, it's a real pain in the butt from a logistical standpoint to actually move these things around. So,
It's
yeah.
got it's Godbold's idea to move the gun, and once that idea is made known to Devereux, he's like, "Oh, that's a good idea. Everybody move your guns." So,
Yeah.
so all of the guns, and then we're not talking from one end of the island to the other. We're talking, 50,
100
60
feet.
yards, or
Yeah,
yeah, or
whatever. Yeah.
a couple
Just
hundred
don't
feet or
be where
something.
you was. Yeah,
Correct.
exactly.
But they do it every night. They do it
Right.
every blessed night. Um, One of the AAA guns, not the battery, the guns, was unmanned because they didn't have enough people to man them. And Godbold took it upon himself, obviously with the approval of his senior officers, to train some of these civilians to operate this weapon.
Right. So
And
we now have a civilian gun crew on one of these AAA mounts.
yeah, yeah, and according to Godbold, who said it later, he said that they operated that weapon just as good as the Marines did because, they knew, as you were saying before, their lives are at stake here too.
It's amazing how quickly you can come up the learning curve when yeah, the fear of God is put into you.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, no kidding,
yep,
no kidding. So the Wake Island is raided multiple times over the next several days. And like I put in the notes, a blind man could tell what they were doing.
sure. We're
They
softening up this
started
island
exactly, and
preparation
because
for.
instead of hammering the airfield, they start hammering everything on the outside on the periph. So
Hmm. Getting rid of the shore defenses. Yep.
yeah, the one thing we talked about, there's guys that were wounded in that first attack and they do perish later in the hospital, is because the hospital is hit.
Yeah.
The hospital is hit heavily, and it was marked. It was marked per Red Cross standards with the big friggin' Red Cross on the roof. And the Japanese hit it and bomb it, and a lot of people are killed in there. There are two doctors, Navy doctors, excuse me, on site. There's two gentlemen named Doctors Khan and Doctor
And
Shank.
Shang.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and they went up pulling people out of the burning building, and then go establishing. They have to establish another triage center or
Yep.
something like that, for lack of a better term. And they do it in these magazines, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. Because the magazines are relatively well protected from this kind of stuff, because obviously you want to have a fairly beefy building if you're going to be putting your ammunition in there. So they essentially ends up requisitioning two of these magazines and turning them into little mini field hospitals. So they've they're able to put two 21 bed wards into these two little magazines as a result.
Yeah. On one of these raids, the gentleman that we mentioned before first starts to put his name into legend, and that is Captain Henry T., or as they called him, Hammer and Hank Elrod. He's aloft in his Wildcat. He spots, this is on the 10th, he spots a flight of 22 Nels and attacks it alone by himself. Um, he dives in and out of the formation. He claims two Nels. There is one that is absolutely definite that does not return
For
home.
sure. Yeah.
The other one does return back to home. It was smoking pretty badly, but from everything I was able to find, it kind of was,
Yeah.
a
Makes it
hanger.
back to the Marshalls.
Yeah,
Yep.
it makes it back, and then it's a hanger queen after that. It doesn't
Yeah.
go, pretty much. So technically, it is a second kill. But let's talk about the Japanese. So
Here we go.
now we talked about the Japanese aerial onslaught.
Hmm.
There's gonna be more that's gonna come. Let's riff on
Yeah.
these guys.
Yeah, so the landing force that is coming, spoiler alert, is commanded by a guy named Rear Admiral Kajioka Sadamichi. He is a graduate of the Etajima class of 1911. He is mostly a navigator, so this is not a surface warfare officer really.
Nope.
He's a navigator, and has been doing those sorts of commands all through his career. He commanded the light cruiser Nagara and later the light cruisers Kasuga and Kiso. And for the wake operation, he is in command of crew divs 18 and des divs 29 and 30. This is not the A team. This is arguably more like the D team in that you've got some of the oldest light cruisers in the Japanese inventory. You've got the Tatsuda, the Tenryu, and the
Mhm.
Yubari. And one of the things that I find so interesting about this is that all three of those ships, spoiler alert, are going to feature in the Battle of Savo Island at Guadalcanal in August of 1942. They're, these squadrons are the kinds of forces that you're going to use to garrison kind of backwater regions, and Rabaul is going to be that at the beginning of Guadalcanal. So these old cruisers are going to be down there too. They actually do have some fairly exciting combat moments in their career. But yes, these are the gentlemen that are going to be showing up to try to invade Wake Island. Likewise, the two destroyer divisions that are coming across are really old destroyers. These are Kamikaze and Motsuki class destroyers. So these are World War I vintage combatants. They are, the equivalent of our four Piper
Mhm.
destroyers in the U.S. Navy. They're rocking 4.7-inch guns in single mounts, open mounts. They are not power trained. They don't have any sort of what do I want to say, power operated, hoist machinery and that kind of
Right,
stuff. These
right.
are hand served mounts being fired over open iron sights. Again, this is very much not the A team. They are going to be bringing along 450 troops from the Second Maizuru Special Naval Landing Force. And it's funny because when you start looking at some of the articles on this, they will often refer to the SNLF as Japanese Marines,
Right.
and they ain't.
No.
Um, the whole way that the Japanese Navy organized their landing troops, they viewed them as expedience, I guess I would say, that if we're given an assignment where we need to have a landing party to secure the defense of a location, we will put together these sort of ad hoc units, use them, land them, and in many cases disband them after they have been landed. Um, and so they are also formed on the basis of Japan's naval districts back in the home islands. And so the four main districts back there, you've got Kure, you've got Sasebo, you've got Maizuru, and then it's got to be Yokosuka would be the fourth, I would assume. Um, and so each one of those districts, by the time you get to the eve of World War II, has got two or three battalions worth of these landing troops. Um, they are equipped with army weapons because the Navy doesn't really want to invest anything in developing much in the way of specialized equipment. Although later in the
Mhm.
war, they will have amphibious tanks and that kind of stuff in very small quantities. But these guys are basically armed with infantry light weapons, grenade launchers, and that sort of thing. They have very little in the way of any sort of heavy artillery or heavy firepower. It really is a light infantry force armed with machine guns and rifles and grenade launchers. That's pretty much what they got. So anyway, Second Maizuru is coming along, and here's the interesting part: as you put in the notes, they're bringing along 450 guys, and yet their
Yes.
intel reports are telling them there's 1,000 Marines on this island and 600 civilians. So that suggests a fair amount of confidence in the fighting ability of these troops, which I would suggest is highly unwarranted. But then again, if you look at the way the Japanese are running the entirety of this first phase offensives, they are in many cases putting their forces up against allied formations that are two or three times their size and just basically saying, yeah, but we're better than you. And in a lot of cases they are. I mean, this
Right.
is this is what happens in Malaya over and over again. It happens in Hong Kong. I hate to say it too. So you know, is this arrogance on the part of the Japanese? Yeah. But in these early campaigns, they often get away with this sort of running things on a shoestring. So yeah, they're only bringing in 450 troops to this fight. There you
Yeah.
go.
I forget what is the ratio you want at least 2 to 1, if not three
Three
to
to one.
one.
3 to 1
Yeah.
is what you want on
When
the
you're
water's edge.
landing and
Uh,
you ain't even you ain't even close,
Not even.
you're not even
No, it's
close to
one to
that.
three if your
Yeah.
intel
Yeah.
estimates are right, which, and they're not right. Obviously, we
Right.
know that the Americans have only got, 300 some guys on this island, but nevertheless, you're in the best case, you're looking at 1 to 1. So
Yeah.
that ain't super, but
No, not at all.
yeah,
Not at all. And and it's like I put in the notes, it had been suggested, it has been in books and even in the Marine Corps monograph talks about this, that that it was thought by the Japanese that due to the airstrikes and they'd hit Wake one, two, three or four times. I forget now, I forget which now.
yeah,
These 3 or 4 times via air with heavy strikes
yeah,
that most of the facilities were destroyed, and they were to be 100% true,
yeah,
and that the Marines would just fold like a lawn chair, and that is not going to be the case as we're going to see. But I mean, as I
yeah,
put in the notes again, 450. I don't care how confident you are, 450 guys against what your intel's saying is 1,000 Marines.
yeah.
That's just
That gives you an
dumb.
indication of yeah, of how incredibly low they rated our combat power and our
Yeah,
morale in
yeah,
particular. That they thought that these airstrikes would, yeah, do in our morale, and we would just give up.
yeah.
So yeah,
So let's get into this, and I want to. I'm sure the audience is going to want to hear what you got to say here. So for years and years and years and years and years, the capture of Wake Island was just seen as a land grab. Like, oh, hey, we're on this offensive, let's just take it. That's not really the case here, though, is it?
yeah. The Japanese throughout these early phase operations would suffer from uh, what I would call outpost-itis, in that it became this sort of self-replicating logic that, well, if I've got a series of bases that I want to protect, then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab outposts around those bases to form a defensive cordon. But lo and behold, you capture these outposts, and now, oh, well, maybe they need outposts to protect them too. The
Mhm.
same logic is the reason for the Battle of Coral Sea, I would argue, in that when the Japanese grab Rabaul at the tip of New Britain, they instantly recognize this is a very important base, and therefore we need to have outposts around it to protect it. Gee, we're getting bombed by this place called Port Moresby. Let's go grab it. And I swear to God, if they had grabbed Port Moresby, they would have said, well, Port Moresby is getting
Darwin.
bombed by this, by Townsville in Australia. We should probably get an outpost to protect Port Moresby. It just, this military
Where does
never
it
had the
end?
ability.
Yeah.
Yeah, presumably that logic would replicate all the way to Kansas if it were given an opportunity. So, in any case, that's the reason that they're coming here to grab Wake. It is to grab an outpost that will be a bulwark to protect their main holdings in the Marshall Islands, and potentially, of course, too, to project power towards the Hawaiian Islands if they ever decide to go there. So that's why they're coming here to grab Wake.
So Kagioka did not, as we said, he was massively overconfident.
Yep,
And it wasn't just him, it was the whole
the
Japanese
whole lot.
military. Yeah, the
Yep,
whole shooting match. They figured, or Kagioka specifically figured that he could take Wake in 2 days, and he was going to do it with landing
100
150 guys on Wilkes and 300 on Peel. And that was
is
his
the big island. Yeah,
thought. Yeah, that
that's
was his
his
thought.
oops. So it
Yeah,
goes.
yeah. So let's talk about the first landing attempt here.
Attempt
Attempt.
December 11th.
December the 11th, 1941. So the Marines and the civilian volunteers had been in their foxholes since the 10th because they'd come under air attack on the 10th. And Devereux had kind of sniffed it out that, they're coming.
Yeah,
They're not just bombing us to expend ammunition. They're coming, and they're going to be coming sooner rather than later. So he
yep,
essentially kept everybody, including the volunteers, the civilians in foxholes or defensive positions or whatever, almost 24 hours a day because that was their safest spot to be during an air raid, number one. And number two, if the defecation hits the ventilation, that's where you need to be.
Yep.
So in the pre-dawn hours of December the 11th, the waiting, as I put in the notes, ended. Lookouts on Wilkes Island spotted something moving out to sea. Captain Wesley Platt, whom you're going to hear a lot about next week, was the strong point commander in the southeastern section of Wilkes. He looked through a pair of binoculars and stared at the sea for a long time, for minutes, because he's getting his gyranes are saying, "Hey, boss, there's something moving out there." So he's
Yeah.
just literally just standing there watching and waiting to see if something moves. He didn't see anything initially. And then as he continues to stare, he sees something move, whether it's a ship or a boat or whatever.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He, according to witnesses, he puts his glasses down, just says, "Son of a bitch," under his
Yeah.
breath, and immediately called Devereux. And he says, when Devereux picks up the horn, he says, "Sure looks like some ships out there, sir." Devereaux goes out from his HQ, gets on top of a bunker, and does the same thing. Just stands there with binoculars and just stares out to sea. And he said, he wrote later, he says, quote, "I studied the sea through the night glasses. If anything had come close to shore, it had moved out again. The sea seemed empty, but then I saw them." And he
Hmm.
says, as he takes the binoculars down, he just said, "Here they are."
Yep.
And he knew they were coming. He counted, and it's pretty accurate, considering you're looking at this is about 3 o'clock in the morning. He counts some 13 ships out there, is what
Pretty
he
much right on
sees.
the money. Yep.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
not bad, not bad.
Not bad. Yeah. Three cruisers and some destroyers.
Yeah,
So yeah, as soon as we get at least a little light at 0400, we put up um, what is left of our air power on the island. So
all
all four
four
of
of
the
them.
F4Fs go up at that point, and now these Wildcats have got a 100-pound bomb under each of their wings. So they take off at 0515 and are now up in the air. The other thing that Devereux has told his 5-inch gunners is that he wants them to hold fire until he tells them
Yes.
to go ahead and commence. And he is convinced that if the Japanese decide to stand off and bombard us from range, we're going to lose. And so
Yeah.
he wants to provoke a sense of complacency in the Japanese, draw them in if at all possible, get them really close to the island before he's going to give the order to his 5-inch guns, which are by far his most effective shore batteries, to go ahead and open fire. So we're just sitting here waiting for the Japanese to do their thing. Kajioka initially brings his ships into about 8,000 yards,
Which is
and
freaking close, by the
that's
way.
already pretty close. That's only 4 miles away, a little 5.
Yeah.
And the 5-inch gunners at this point are tracking them, and they're certainly, uh, you know, talking back to Devereux, "Can we open up now?" And
Right.
he's like, "No, you can't." And sure enough, the Japanese fall for this. They're not taking any fire from this island, and that convinces them that the American batteries have maybe already been knocked out or whatever. And so Kajioka brings Yubari, which is the biggest of these light cruisers, in to about between 4 and 5,000 yards, and finally starts opening fire on Wake from those warships.
Yeah. They start doing these, and I'll post a map that was drawn by the
Yeah,
Marines after the war. They start doing these like lazy,
S turn kind of things.
yeah, the
Yeah,
really, really wide S turns, and then they're just shooting up the shore. But of course, every turn they make, they're coming a little bit closer, and they're coming a
yeah.
little bit closer, and a little bit closer. Um, the
And
Japanese, go ahead.
I was just going to say, just in terms of Japanese landing doctrine, I'm intrigued by this because most of what I know about that, it comes from Alan Millett, who
Hmm.
has written on that topic fairly extensively. And the Japanese preferred to land at night, if at all possible, and against undefended beachheads. But they know that this one may well be defended. It seems, though, that they are lining up here for a daylight landing, that they are going to bombard Wake for a number of hours, soften it up, and then go ahead and put their SNLF into their Daihatsu barges and put them up on the beach. I presume during the day. I haven't been able to find any source material
It
that,
had to have been
yeah,
because Yubari opens fire at 0522.
right. So we're going to do this for the morning, and we're probably going to go in sometime before lunchtime. Would be my, that's my off the cuff.
One would imagine so, yes.
Mhm.
Because I mean, I don't know what the sunrise is. We could
And this
figure it
is one of
out,
those areas where
but
it's just like, you know, how come we haven't got a translation of Senshi Sosho that I can go and look this up? I may point my phone at it one of these days and see. Anyway, but the bottom line is that these three Japanese cruisers are now opening up on Wake, and they are, you know, their shell fire is hit and miss, as you put in in the notes. Some of the rounds land within the camp areas. They hit some of our diesel storage tanks, and
yeah,
that makes a very large kaboom. But the majority of these shells overshoot and land in the lagoon, which makes perfect sense because, again, they're in not necessarily calm seas. These ships do not have modern fire control, really. So these guys, the gunners on these things, are firing pretty much over open sights. Although the light cruisers have got fire control equipment, the destroyers don't have much in the way of that. But in any case, the accuracy of the gunnery from these ships is not terribly good.
yeah. So this is straight out of the Marine Corps monograph. It says, quote, nearing the western tip of Wake 20 minutes later, Kagioka's flagship, the Yubari, closed to within 6,500 yards, scouring the beach with her 5.5-inch fire. At 06, the light cruiser reversed course yet again. Again, I'll show the map, and
Mm-hmm.
closed the range still further, unquote. So as she keeps getting closer, about 5,000 yards, and you're 100% right, is that these 5-inch gunners are
Just
itching. Yeah,
spittle running
they
down the
are
chin. Come on.
itching to open fire. And that
Yep.
and Devereux wrote later, after the war, that his phone was ringing off the hook. And he's like, "Can we go? Can we shoot? Can we shoot? Can we shoot?" And
Yeah.
every time he'd just simply say, "Not yet, not yet,"
Right.
because he wanted to draw him in, kind of like the spider does to the fly. Draw him
Yeah.
in a little bit closer, a little bit closer. By 0610, Yabari was 4,500 yards from Battery A on Peacock Point, with the
Yep.
destroyer Hayate, the same distance-ish from Battery L on Wilkes. At that moment,
Yeah. So these
Devereaux
ships
gives
are,
the command to open fire.
yeah, these ships are now less than 3 miles offshore. That is
And
really
that's
close shooting. So
easy
yeah.
range for a 5-inch gun.
Yes, sir.
Easy range. So almost in unison, because these guys had been like coiled springs.
Yeah.
Boom! Everybody
Yeah.
opens fire at the same damn time. Peacock Point's 5-inch gun was on the high ground, if you will, on a flat island. It
Probably
sent the
all of 6 feet above sea level. Yeah, right.
at
Yeah,
best, it sent the first projectile well beyond the target. These guys adjust range very, very quickly. These are pretty well trained coastal, you know,
yeah,
Marines they know what the hell they're doing. Um, they immediately seem to score hits on Yubari, and we can talk about this in a second.
yeah,
Yubari is as we said, is Kagioka's flagship. The Marines claim, and still claim to this day, that they hit Yubari. Um, Kagioka's flagship returns counter battery fire to the Marines on there, and they land a couple of shells in Battery B's vicinity. They are, as you said before, the fire is woefully inaccurate at
yep,
this point. Um, Yubari is still sailing, and she's being straddled by the 5-inch batteries. And again, they claim they hit it, but John, we talked about this.
yeah.
Her tabular record of movement says that she wasn't hit, yet
That's
crewmen that
correct.
were on it say that she was. So this
Sources
goes
are
back to what we were
conflicting.
talking about earlier, the confusion.
Yeah, yeah. We don't know. The bottom line is, though, that she does end up laying down a smoke screen because she
Yes.
realizes relatively quickly that she's in a place where she ought not to be. So, yeah, I would like more clarification of that as well, and that's another area that Senshi Social might be able to help us out. But in any case, yeah, she lays a smoke screen and begins to get out of Dodge.
As I put in the notes, that smoke screen is probably
What the
what the
Marines are
Marine.
seeing,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and well-trained crew or not, there should have been visible evidence
Hmm.
And at this range, you would have expected that there would have been hits. So it's a little disappointing that there was not something more tangible that would have, like killing Kajioka on the bridge. That was
Right.
perfectly within the realm of expectation. But in any case, yeah, so it goes.
Oh, that confirmation's
Meanwhile,
coming though.
yeah, out at Battery L, the rangefinder had been damaged during one of the air raids, and they didn't have it repaired at this point. But they order uh, the battery to use Kentucky windage and lob a few shells and then walk them in. And so Hayate, which is one of these older destroyers, turned broadside to the beach right in front of Battery L, and they open up on her. First shot is over, and the gunner, John McAllister, known as Johnny Mac, that's a great nickname, dialed the
Yeah, it
next
is.
round down. Shot was under. Platt, who was observing through the binoculars, set it in the open and adjusted the fire a bit up, and the next shot is right on the money.
Yeah.
Slams into her aft portions, just a little bit aft of the midships, and Platt at that point yells, "You're in, Johnny Mac. You're in. Let her have another one." And they do.
Mhm.
So bottom line is
She,
that, yeah,
oh, go ahead.
Hayate
Go ahead.
just goes kaboom. They hit her
Yeah.
in her magazine, and she goes right up in a massive explosion that breaks the ship in two, and she sinks within 2 minutes and takes her entire crew down with her.
Yeah. Was it like 150 guys, 156 guys?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Yep.
that's just instantaneous.
Boom,
So
gone.
when this happens, naturally, the 17, 18-year-old boys start going berserk.
Bananas. Yeah.
Yeah. Start going absolute berserk. One of Battery L's older salts yelled, quote, "Knock it off, you jackasses. What do you think this is? A ball game. Get back to the damn guns."
Yeah.
Hey,
Yep.
you
And
got to cut
start.
through the crap to get to the
Yeah,
business.
absolutely. We're still in a
So,
war here. So they end up then taking some of Hayate's sister ships, Oite and Mochizuki, under fire and do manage to get some hits on them. Oite suffers 14 wounded, and Mochizuki sustains an undetermined number of casualties. So, yeah, and their return fire is not very effective. Again, older ships, bad fire control, open mouths, operating under local control. Yeah, their gunnery is just garbage. So,
yeah. Battery L is not the only one that's going to see action here, too. Battery B, under First Lieutenant Kessler, is at the tip of Peel Island. It's dueling with the destroyers. Is it Yayoi? Yayoi?
yeah, Yayoi, Mutsuki, and Kisaragi.
So three,
Yeah,
dueling with three Japanese destroyers, as well as the Tenryu and the Tatsuta.
yeah,
They draw heavy counter battery fire for
yeah,
obvious reasons from all those ships. Um, it actually disables this 5-inch gun that is shooting there at Battery B. The crew gets the hell out of there, goes to another weapon, um, and starts firing back at these people. Kessler's remaining guns hit on Yoyoi's stern, which killed one man, wounded 17 others, and started a fire.
yeah,
His gunners then shifted their attention to the next destroyer, which is going to be Mutsuki. At this point, the enemy's counterfire severed communications, as we talked about earlier. That's going to happen when you got open phone lines laying on the sand between
yeah,
Kessler's command post and the gun. But Battery B, the muzzle blast temporarily disabling the rangefinder, continued to fire in local control. So these guys are literally just looking down the bore
yep,
and pumping rounds at the targets as fast as they can put them in the breach.
yep,
Kajioka takes an absolute beating here before he even gets a man on shore.
yep,
And he's
yeah.
like, "I'm out,"
I'm out. Yeah, not
which
this
is
isn't.
unusual, right? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, typically the Japanese didn't turn around and run like this, but I think there's an old phrase that a ship's a fool to fight a fort, and
Mhm.
he recognizes that this is a thornier target than he had anticipated. I don't know if he knows that he's lost Hayate at this point, because again, he has separate formations that are attacking each of these batteries. But it's pretty clear that, yeah, he's taken a lot more fire than he had really counted on. And it ain't over yet, because at this
No.
point, the Marine air cover shows up. and makes their debut in the fighter bomber role.
Yeah. Oh my God. And the beating that these people put on the Japanese, it's
Yeah,
insane. So
yeah.
it's Elrod is airborne, as is Major Putnam and Lieutenants Theron and I'm sorry, Captain Theron and Freuler. Again,
Hmm.
forgive me if I'm butchering the gentleman's last name. They begin to make just repeated strafing runs on the Japanese as they're retreating. They do drop their 100-pound bombs. The Japanese put up AAA, which we've poo-pooed Japanese naval AAA in the past, but this is fairly accurate. Granted, they're only shooting at four American fighter aircraft, but
Yeah, and there's
it's
not a lot of 25s, 25 millimeter mounts on these ships. Again, these are very old.
yeah,
Yeah, I doubt that these things had so much as a pair of 25 millimeters on any one of them. I should go and look that up. So
yeah.
I have failed in my role of IGN
What,
nerd. But
what,
yeah, it was
whatever it
whatever
is, it
they
hurts them
had.
though. Yeah,
Yeah, it was sufficiently vigorous to make life for Elrod and his three companions relatively exciting. Um, Nevertheless, they make repeated runs over these Japanese ships, and Kajioka is almost killed when one of
yes,
the F-4Fs strafes the bridge of Yubari. And one of the officers on Yubari writes afterwards that they were, quote, hounded out to sea by fanatical American fighters who strafed us relentlessly and dropped bombs with impunity.
yeah.
Which, once again, God bless if we had just had more in the way of air power here. They never would have taken this place from us. But oh well.
Not a
Anyway,
chance. Not a
yep.
chance. So these guys do this, these four fighter pilots, and actually there's a couple of other guys that wind up jumping in the cockpit to give somebody a breather. Elrod makes the attacks all morning long. It goes on
Hmm.
for an hour, actually, a little bit over an hour.
Yep.
They hit a bunch of other ships. Tenryu comes under attack from Putnam, Theron, and Freuler. Um, they strafe her up forward, hit near her number one torpedo tube mount, wounding five guys and disabling three torpedoes. That could have been really
That
bad.
could have been really bad. Yeah. Unless the warheads were not in the torpedoes. I mean that well, yeah, it's hard to say. I'm
Yeah.
in a long discussion actually with Randy Stone,
Hmm.
talking about just we don't know a lot about Japanese torpedo arming practice, and I'll share some of the details with you later on. But turns out these older ships are not armed with Type 93s, but these big oxygen driven torpedoes are really cantankerous, dangerous beasties, and yeah, you they don't typically probably put the triggers in these for these things, unless they think they're going to get
Yeah,
into a
officially
surface fight,
launch them.
which obviously they don't think they're going to be. So, but no, the fact that they've taken fire around one of these torpedo mounts, yeah, if they hit the warhead on that thing, that could be very, very bad news for one of these ships, and they get away scot free, except for the
Yeah.
final attack from our
Yeah.
man Hammer and Hank.
This guy was just such a badass. So he keeps just coming in and coming in and coming in. He drops a bomb, or at least that's what it says. It could have been both, but who knows? He drops a bomb, then it actually hits the destroyer Kisaragi.
Mm-hmm.
It hit amidships and it starts, it's a 100-pounder. So it's not, unless it's like
But
super lucky, it's not going to hit the magazines and maybe, but I doubt it. But what it does do is it starts an internal fire in this old DD, and it actually winds up bringing her to a halt.
yes,
She is dead in the water, and she just sitting there burning. Elrod peels away, goes back home, reloads, rearms, gets ready to go again. And he does take off, but he doesn't get back to the area around Kisaragi because there is no area around Kisaragi because at 0737 Putnam, Major Putnam, who's now making a run on the disabled destroyer, comes
which is
up some
30 miles. Yeah,
30 miles away. All of a sudden,
boom.
up she goes.
Yeah.
156 of her crew go down.
Yep. So yeah, the Japanese have now lost two of these old destroyers in the course of this abortive landing attempt. So all total, the Marine aviators dropped 20 100-pound bombs. So yeah, they were flying multiple sorties and expended 20,000 rounds of 50 cal in their attacks over a period of about an hour. Every aircraft was hit at least once, with Elrod's bird being shot up really, really badly, to the point of complete destruction because it ruptures an oil line, which is going to cause the engine to freeze up. So he puts that bird down in a dead stick landing and then hops out of the. What a dude! Yeah,
Yeah.
and at that point, is greeted by Devereux, uh, and all Elrod could say was, "I'm sorry as hell about the plane." Just the king of understatement. Yeah.
Yeah, big time.
Yep.
By the end of the morning, two
Yeah. We're down to two.
F4Fs are
Yeah.
available to fly. And even then, they're only because every one of them gets, we talked about the AA, every one of them gets hit by Japanese anti-aircraft fire and
Yeah.
to some degree. And they're only able to fly with scavenged parts from the other, you know, destroyed
Yeah.
aircraft. So the tally for the 11th of December is two ships sunk by gunfire or aircraft,
Yep.
one of each, obviously. Seven
Yep.
others have been damaged to some various degree. There's another air raid that follows this event, and two Nels are shot down in that air raid. And this is
Hmm.
about 2 hours after Kajioka departs.
Yeah.
Um, and one would think that Devereux is going to be ecstatic over this defense, and he is. Obviously, he's happy,
Very pleased.
but he's not stupid. He knows that they're going to come back, and they're
Yeah,
going to
they
come
are.
back, and it's not going to be easy.
Yeah. Yeah. At this point, Teeters has now cobbled together about 450 civilians who are more than willing to fight if and when the Japanese came back. And he goes and tells Devereaux, I've got the equivalent of a couple of companies worth of civies at this point who are willing to, join the ranks, if you will. Um, he and Devereaux discuss their disposition and come to the plan that basically the civilians are going to stand watches, deliver food, and build shelters for the inevitable return clash that they know is going to be coming.
Yeah.
So,
He, I love this quote here. He goes back to his HQ, and his corporal, who was his runner, just smiles at him and says, it's been quite a day, hasn't it, Major?" And Devereaux just replies, says, "Indeed it has. Indeed it has." So this last quote again comes from the Japanese monograph, from the Marine Corps monograph, and it goes like this, quote, "The Japanese force, meanwhile, humbled by sizable casualties," and they were,
mhm.
"withdrew to the Marshalls, having requested aircraft carrier reinforcement. Hundreds of miles away at Pearl Harbor, elements of the 4th Marine Defense Battalion received orders to begin preparing for an operation, the destination of which was closely held. The Marines of the battalion fervently desired to assist their comrades on Wake Island, and many of them probably concluded, 'We're headed for Wake.'"
Yes. And now it is shaping up for round two.
Hmm. And round two, you know, I think probably anybody who's watched this knows the story of Elrod and sinking the Japanese destroyer and battery L popping Hayate. And the common image of Wake Island is the Japanese swarming ashore and killing all the Marines and capturing a bunch of them and the civilians and everything else. And it's a cakewalk. Well, let me tell you, brother,
Mm-mm,
it ain't.
it ain't.
It
Yeah.
is not at
And once
all.
again, yeah, that lost year worth of time looms large in the the narrative arc of the coming attack. So
Yeah, and
yeah,
there's why we broke this up, because there's so much to talk about, because there's relief efforts that the
right.
U.S. Navy is planning
Yeah,
and quite frankly executing when
yes.
the this everything goes south. So,
Yeah.
and
We'll
we'll
talk
talk
about
about
that
that
next
next.
time.
Yeah. All right, man.
Cool.
You good?
Yeah, I'm
All right.
good.
All right, let's wrap this sucker. So, with that,
All
we want
right.
to thank you very much for listening in on this conversation. Please send us a rating and review. We do appreciate it. If you have a comment, send us an email at unauthorizedpacificpodcast@gmail.com, and I'll do my best to reply to you. I've caught up, but I have not looked at any of the questions that you guys have been sending in. As we're recording this, the Q&A questions are still flowing in. Of course, this hasn't
We got a
aired
lot.
yet.
Got some good ones.
I don't know if they're any good. I haven't looked at them. I promised
Right.
Sean I wouldn't read them.
Yeah.
But just suffice to say, there's more than enough for a couple of shows. I'll just say
Okay.
that.
More than
There's
enough
a
for a
load
couple
of them.
of cocktails. That's what I like to hear.
There's a
So
load of them.
cool.
So thank you guys very much for sending those in. So
Yeah.
um, just want to say again, thank you very much for listening or watching. My name is Seth Paridon. John, my buddy, thanks for being here as always.
Yep, I'm the scintillating John Parshall, and we will see you again next week.